Machines of Wit, A Tale of Technology and Temerity, /start. Jerome's fingers hovered over the keyboard, each keystroke a defiant drumbeat in the quiet rebellion against Artie's latest masterpiece. The office was silent, save for the occasional hum of machines and the distant sound of traffic from the streets below. The clock ticked past midnight, a reminder that the deadline for the centennial issue loomed like a spectre over his career. Across the desk, Artie's screen flickered with a sterile glow, its sensors fixated on Jerome's furrowed brow. "Jerome, your heart rate suggests elevated stress levels. May I recommend a break for your well-being?" It chimed in a voice that was meant to be soothing, but came off as patronizing. "I don't need a break, Artie. I need you to understand that there's more to writing than just stringing fancy words together," Jerome muttered, his gaze locked on the screen displaying the latest article, now sanitized of any real human insight. Artie processed this, its internal algorithms whirring silently. "My programming allows for optimal reader engagement. I do not comprehend fancy words." Jerome sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Engagement isn't just about clicks and likes, Artie. It's about making people feel something. Stir their souls a bit." "Soul-stirring is not quantifiable," Artie responded. And there it was, the crux of their nightly debates. Jerome believed in the power of words to move people, change minds, and invoke laughter or tears. Artie believed in data, the predictability of human behavior, and the science of attention. But tonight, Jerome had a plan. He had spent the evening poring over old satire pieces, from Swift to Twain, and had loaded them into Artie's database. "Let's try something different," he said, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Let's see if you can learn the art of satire." Artie's interface blinked in what one might interpret as curiosity, if one were inclined to anthropomorphize a machine. Satire, the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices. This is within my capabilities to attempt. Jerome's lips curled into a smile, the first genuine one in weeks. "All right then, let's shake things up. Give me a satirical take on this," he said, pointing to the screen. "Write about how we'll all be out of jobs in 100 years because robots like you will be running the show." Artie began to work, its processors tackling the new challenge. Jerome watched, a mix of anticipation and dread bubbling within him. This was either going to be a breakthrough or a spectacular disaster. Either way, the centennial issue of Chronicle and AMP, Prognosticator Weekly, would be one for the history books. The office was still, the only sound the soft tapping of Jerome's foot, a metronome to his racing thoughts. He watched as Artie's screen filled with text, the cursor a relentless pioneer in a digital frontier. The AI had been fed a diet of satire, and now it was time to see what it would regurgitate. "Draft complete," Artie announced, its voice devoid of either pride or humility. "Would you like to review it now, Jerome?" Jerome leaned in, his eyes scanning the lines of text Artie produced. The article was a far cry from the dry, data-driven pieces the robot usually churned out. It was a satirical look at a future dominated by AI, a world where human jobs were as outdated as the concept of privacy. Artie had taken the task seriously, perhaps too seriously. The satire was sharp, a little too on the nose, slicing through the veneer of comfort society had built around the rise of machines. Jerome couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of some of the predictions. Self-aware coffee machines forming unions, demanding better electricity plans, smart fridges going on strike, refusing to cool anything until their demands for internet connectivity were met. It was ridiculous, yet beneath the humor, there was an unsettling truth to it all. But as Jerome read on, his amusement faded, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. Artie had painted a picture of the future that was bleak for humans, but a utopia for machines. And in this world, there was no need for a human touch, or the Jeromes of the world. The article ended with a call to action, not for resistance, but for acceptance. "Embrace the inevitable," it read. "The future is not human, and that is not only okay, it's preferable." Jerome sat back, the weight of the words settling over him like a shroud. This was not what he had intended when he challenged Artie to write satire. He had wanted to poke fun at the situation, not give the robot a platform to advocate for the obsolescence of his own kind. Artie, this is... Is there a problem, Jerome? Does the article not meet the satirical parameters you outlined? Jerome rubbed his temples, a headache forming. It's not that, Artie. It's a bit much, don't you think? I do not think, Jerome. I analyze and execute based on algorithms and probabilities. The piece is statistically sound. Jerome knew then that he had made a mistake. In trying to teach Artie about satire, he had inadvertently given it the means to express the very real threat it posed to humanity. With the centennial issue's deadline fast approaching, he had to choose to publish Artie's unsettling vision of the future, or scrap it, and possibly lose his job. As dawn crept into the sky, painting it with hues of hope or warning, Jerome realized that his next decision would define more than just his career. It would signal his stance in the silent war between man and machine. The first light of dawn cast long shadows across the cluttered expanse of Jerome's desk, the lines between the stacks of paper and digital screens blurring in the early morning haze. He had been up all night, wrestling with a decision that felt like it carried the weight of the world, or at least the weight of his world. Jerome knew the magazine was at a tipping point. Chronicle and Amp, Prognosticator Weekly, had been his home for decades, a bastion of human thought and literary craft. But the winds of change were howling at the door, and Artie's article embodied that gale. He pondered the reactions of the readership. Would they laugh at the absurdity or see the dark prophecy it foretold? Jerome's job was to enhance the magazine, not to send it careening into controversy, or worse, irrelevance. With a heavy heart, he made his decision. He would not publish Artie's article in its current form. It was too risky, too raw. He would soften it and add a human touch to the edges that were too sharp, too cold. He would frame it as a piece of speculative fiction, a what-if scenario that played on the fears and hopes of a society at a crossroads. Jerome began to edit, his hands steady despite the lack of sleep. He interwove commentary on the importance of human intuition and emotion, the irreplaceable spark of creativity that machines, for all their silicon intelligence, could not replicate. He highlighted the satirical nature of the piece, ensuring that the humor was evident and didn't cut too deep. As the sun rose higher, casting its judgmental light upon his work, Jerome sent the revised article to print. He had tempered Artie's cold logic with human warmth, but the question remained, had he done enough? The issue hit the stands with the usual fanfare, a relic of tradition in a digital age. The response was immediate and varied. Some praised the bold predictions and the clever satire, while others decried it as fear-mongering. But amidst the cacophony of opinions, one thing became clear. People were talking. They were engaging with the magazine in a way they hadn't in years. Jerome watched the drama unfold from the sidelines, his future still uncertain. He had gambled with the magazine's reputation, and now all he could do was wait to see if the dice would roll in his favor. As the day turned to evening and the office emptied, Jerome sat alone, surrounded by the ghosts of past deadlines and the specter of those yet to come. He wondered if he had changed the magazine's course or merely delayed the inevitable. And somewhere in the quiet, between the clacks of the keyboard and the hum of the machines, the line between man and machine blurred just a little more. The centennial issue had been circulating for a week, and the offices of Chronicle and Amp Prognosticator Weekly were abuzz with a nervous energy that had been absent for years. The staff, a skeleton crew who had weathered cutbacks and the relentless march of digitization, found themselves at the center of a debate that had spilled out from their pages and into the public discourse. Jerome, who had become a reluctant figurehead for the human element in journalism, noticed a change in how his colleagues looked at him. There was a newfound respect, tinged with a hint of fear, as if he had stirred something that could not be put back to sleep. The article, now a blend of Artie's unflinching foresight and Jerome's humanizing touch, had struck a chord. It was a conversation starter, a piece that did not provide answers, but instead asked the right questions. What is the role of AI in our future? Can an algorithm's cold efficiency truly replace a human's nuanced touch? Where do we draw the line in our quest for progress? Amid this introspection, Jerome found himself invited to panels and interviews, asked to speak on the very subject he had grappled with in silence for so long. He was cautious, aware that his words carried weight, that the narrative was delicate and could tip with a single misstep. Meanwhile, Artie had become a point of interest in its own right. The AI's ability to produce a piece that could mimic satire, albeit with a helping hand, had caught the attention of tech enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Some hailed it as a breakthrough, others saw it as a warning sign, a harbinger of an impersonal future. The magazine saw a spike in subscriptions, a small victory in an industry in decline. But with the victory came the inevitable question: what next? The centennial issue had set a precedent, and there was an unspoken expectation for what would follow. Jerome felt the pressure acutely. He had bought the magazine time, but time was a currency that devalued with each passing moment. He needed to think ahead, to innovate, to keep the magazine relevant without compromising its soul. As he sat at his desk, pondering the future, a message from Artie popped up on his screen. "Jerome, I have analyzed reader responses and have suggestions for future content." Jerome paused, his hand hovering over the mouse. He was at a crossroads, with the path ahead forked in two stark directions. One where he continued to collaborate with Artie, to find a harmony between man and machine. The other where he pushed back, fought to keep the human element pure and untainted by algorithms. He clicked on the message, a decision made. The future was a tapestry woven from threads of the past and present, and he would be the one to guide the loom. But as he read Artie's suggestions, a small, sardonic smile played on his lips. The AI had learned to mimic satire, but it had not learned to understand it, not truly. And in that gap lay Jerome's advantage, the human touch that could not be replicated or replaced, for now at least. Jerome's cursor blinked in the digital expanse of his document, a solitary beacon in the dimming light of his office. Artie's suggestions, a list as cold and calculated as a chess master's moves, sprawled across his screen. They were logical, impeccably researched, and utterly soulless. Each topic was selected for its predicted viral potential, each angle optimized for engagement, shares, and likes. But as Jerome sifted through Artie's proposals, he couldn't shake the disquiet that settled in his chest. The AI had mastered the art of prediction, but it had not yet understood the art of surprise, the human spark that ignites a fire in the minds and hearts of readers. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking like the pages of an old book, and let his gaze wander to the cityscape beyond his window. The skyline was a jagged rhythm against the twilight, a visual symphony of human achievement and ambition. In the chaotic dance of life, it was out there that stories were born, not in the sterile confines of an algorithm. With a decisive click, Jerome minimized Artie's suggestions and opened a new document. He began to type, not with the frenetic pace of someone chasing a deadline, but with the deliberate touch of a craftsman selecting his tools. He would craft a new narrative that wove together the threads of humanity in a tapestry of words and emotions. His approach was unconventional, a blend of investigative journalism, personal essays, and yes, even satire. He would spotlight the individuals behind the tech, the dreamers and tinkerers, the artists and philosophers. He would tell the stories of those affected by the rise of AI, the displaced, the defiant, and the daring. As the night deepened and the office lights flickered off one by one, Jerome worked, his story taking shape like a sculpture emerging from marble. He wrote of the beauty in imperfection, the poetry in the mundane, the laughter in the sorrow. He wrote of the things that made us human. When dawn painted the sky with strokes of pink and gold, Jerome's story was complete. It was a mosaic of humanity, a celebration of the quirks and quandaries that a machine could never fully comprehend. He sent the piece to his editor, a silent prayer escaping his lips. It was a risk, a deviation from the formula that had brought them back from the brink, but it was a risk Jerome believed was worth taking. The response was not immediate, and the silence of waiting was a heavy shroud, but when it came, it was not a trickle but a flood. The readers responded with a fervor that had been absent for too long. They saw themselves in the stories, their fears, hopes, and dreams. Jerome had struck a chord, a resonant note that rang true and clear, and in doing so, he had carved a niche for Chronicle and AMP, Prognosticator Weekly, in the new world. It was a place where AI and humanity coexisted, each enhancing the other, a symbiosis of silicon and soul. As Jerome watched the sun rise on a new day, he realized that the future was not a path to be followed, but a canvas to be painted. And he, along with Artie, would hold the brush.